Well, I mean, obviously the homelessness is another big issue because it's connected to public safety, and it's this idea that you're paying very high-priced municipal workers, police officers, to run around after schizophrenics and other people that have medical conditions. It makes no sense. It's the worst allocation of your resources that you could do.
Well, in a way, I mean, it's been pointed out by a number of folks who have looked at this, is that we used to institutionalize people.
Right.
Some of those people you talk about would be in institutions. We decided that was harsh and inhumane, and so we did away with that. We still institutionalize them. It's called prison.
Well, exactly. The prisons are your largest mental health facility.
And that is butt backwards.
Totally, and it's expensive. It doesn't fix, in a sense, anybody. The price of treatment of somebody is much cheaper, especially like when you get them on the streets. And again, it's this combination of the jail and your hospital emergency room. I mean, we do things in the most expensive way possible. And again, to use Santa Ana as an example, where are we funneling it all through? The police department. And we expect them to just do everything. Go sit with a schizophrenic. Go deal with some of these issues that, again, are the most, in somewhat difficult populations to deal with. And you see the issue continues. We ended up in federal court back in March with a federal judge threatening to, invalidate camping ordinances,
and still doing that, I think, right? I mean, it's still ongoing. Let's talk about Santa Ana, because they are really in the center of it. First of all, you had the Civic Center, right next to the Board of Supervisors, where that's basically where a good chunk of people were living. Right. And what's been Santa Ana's approach to this? They have borne a bigger burden than others, and I don't think they don't really like that, right? I mean, what's going on? What position are they taking? They sued. They sued the other cities, saying you guys have to do more.
Because other cities are dumping their homeless into Santa Ana, and that's been proven, and pretty much. I mean, it's been shown in a lot of different ways. That's why in court that picked up steam. The challenge in Santa Ana is, you're right, they do more, but they still don't do a lot. I mean, there's this Courtyard Transition Center, an old abandoned bus terminal that they changed to be able to put people in there. Santa Ana City Council fought that tooth and nail, and yet today 500 people sleep there at night that used to be sleeping outside on the Civic Center grounds, and they just allowed that situation to just continue and continue. Now they finally did sue other cities. They are in the middle of this federal lawsuit, but look at where this federal lawsuit is. You watch these politicians week after week after week say, well, we'll figure out a new shelter site, and they don't. They just don't move at any pace. Let
me come to the defense a little bit of these politicians, because they are being responsive to their residents. And if you go, for instance, to South County, in Irvine, they did not want, and this was explicitly said to me by Mayor Don Wagner when he was on this show, that while he contended that Irvine does a lot as far as transitional housing and things like that, that they did not want to take the Santa Ana riverbed and put it in the Great Park, essentially. And so people in Irvine and other cities say, we don't want this. I think at Santa Ana, they're saying, we've got it. We don't want it either. We want to get rid of this. And so it's a natural inclination of people to say that. A public official has to say, okay, but we have this problem we need to deal with. We all have to come together, and that's the rub. That's where it's really tough to do anything to try. So you saw what happened, what has happened to John Morlock, who I think has admirably used up, the state senator, has used up some of his political capital trying to push this idea of using the Fairview Developmental Center as a transitional place for homeless. It makes perfect sense to everybody except the people in Costa Mesa, who are saying, oh, no, you're going to do this, and then we're going to have homeless people breaking into our homes, defecating in our backyards. And I don't think that's an irrational fear.
No, government doesn't have a good record of citing these facilities in a way that's responsible, it's intelligent, that has plans for how, what do you do with these people during the day. I mean, residents are perfectly, have all their rights to say, not near me. Now here's the key though, there's a thing called institutional zoning. And that's why there's institutional zoning, to respect people's neighborhoods and not put these types of difficult uses right in the middle of their neighborhoods. But that's why you have civic centers, for example. That's where the Courtyard Transition Center is at. 500 people sleep there a night. There's not one complaint about anybody nearby. Why? Because it's by the civic center. Anybody who moved there knew what they were moving towards, an institutional use. What is it in State Senator John Morlock, to his credit, has gone out on a limb and said Fairview Development Center over in Costa Mesa, it's a 100-acre campus, been there since the 1950s, and again, institutional zoning. So whoever moved close to it knew what they were moving close to. These types of areas is the only place. Out in Irvine and Don Wagner's neighborhood, there's 100 acres of open land that the county government owns. In fact, the Irvine City Council slated that as a homeless area years ago, when of course they thought it would never be used that way. So this is the challenge. It's politicking and politicking and politicking.
Let me give John Morlock a little cover here, because I think that his position, let's make it clear, I don't think right now he would say he's advocating for this. He's saying we should study this. He's putting it out on the table. I'm just saying that, and even doing that, and he had Supervisor Sean Nelson, who kind of liked the idea until he heard the roar of the crowd, and now he's trying to back away. But this is what happens when even, if you will, the most courageous, if you will, official step forward, they get, they have to step back because the lion roars.
Well, because at some point too, it's on them that you have to keep moving. Every political leader since the beginning of time has had to stake themselves out and explain, and then get the resources to do it properly. I mean, in this sense,
and that's where the people, even in Costa Mesa, it was fine as Fairview Developmental Center. If you make it a homeless place, those homeless people are going to be roaming around our neighborhoods. We know it. We don't trust government, and it gets just, I think, back to the mood of the electorate right now, where they, and with some reason, they don't think elected officials or that the government is going to be able to execute properly.
And that's the big challenge you have, because you're right, they do have a lot of reasons to look at it from previous examples and say, you will cite a homeless shelter over here, and then you won't pay attention. You won't cite the resources. You'll tell me you don't have enough police officers to deal with it. It's a real conundrum, because at some point too, we do have to move forward, because as you said before, you cannot continue to use your emergency rooms and your local jails as place to house mentally ill people. I guess you can, but it's an incredibly expensive way. The way that
expensive, inefficient, and really ripping at a community at the same time.
Absolutely, and here's the key. Since Orange County's not been able to get that under control, there are a number of communities, West Anaheim, Santa Ana, that are already dealing with the impacts of homelessness, and in a sense, completely without any kind of government aid at all. I mean, they're dealing with it on their sidewalks, behind their businesses, in their libraries. So it's there, it's not going anywhere. This idea of just shooing it around and keep waiting for an election cycle, and this is the problem we have with politicians. In some ways too, it's residents. We have to ask for the information. We have to go and figure out what are these municipal budgets. I mean, always remember, the Founding Fathers left us a do-it-yourself system. You can't just depend on politicians to figure it all out. You've got to go roll up your sleeves, go to the city council, opine, and all. For example, on this homelessness stuff, at least we have a federal judge who is pushing cities, it seems, in a real way to come up with realistic
But in a way, now
approaches.
you just invoked the Founding Fathers. I would say the Constitution did not envisage a federal judge telling communities, this is what you shall do.
But in a sense, all he's telling you is you shall follow the law. You cannot go, if you have not done your work and you have not created any kind of homeless services, you can't go and tell some person on the bottom end of the society that they can't sleep on a bench at night. You can't do, that's illegal to do that, because it violates their civil rights.
Well, and I know I'm going to come out sounding hard-hearted, but let's have this argument. That's vagrancy. That's against the law.
It's desperation. It's not vagrancy.
Well,
it's desperation
I get
when you
all
don't
that,
have
but when you
somewhere
say
to
a
go.
person has a right to sleep on a park bench at night, I would argue, do they?
Well, if there's
Does
no
a person
other,
have a right? Society would hopefully treat humanely a person like that and would get them to a facility or something.
Right.
But I would argue this act, and I do think there are homeless advocates now who, that's what they argue. They have a right to sleep on a park bench at night. I would argue, no, you don't have a right to sleep on a park bench at night.
Now the key is this: you don't have necessarily a right to sleep on a park bench at night. But if you are desperate, you have nowhere to go, and the municipality within where you were in has no place for you to go. What the judge is saying basically is constitutionally, you can't go and arrest that person for vagrancy when there's no other place for that homeless person to go
there's
sleep
jail.
at night.
I mean, and now I'm sounding like
Right.
Ebenezer Scrooge.
Well,
are there not workhouses? But I mean, I'm just saying, I get what you're saying, and believe me, I believe this. I've done shows on this.
Sure.
This has to be dealt with humanely, but I think sometimes you have to draw bright lines, and I think the attitude that a homeless person has a right to sleep on a park bench at night is questionable.
That may be questionable, but we get back to the practicality of it is, let's say they don't have the right to sleep there. What do you do with them? Where do they sleep? And again, this goes back to you as a municipality, just like you have a responsibility to have a police force, a library, a fire department. You've got to have a place for, let's remember, this is a community of 3 million people, and we're talking about 5,000 or so that were on the riverbed.
Yes.
And so it's not like there's 10 million people out there wanting, to be housed, thank God, in a way. It's I think, a very solvable issue. But again, what the judge is saying, and again, it's a very interesting thing. I've never seen a federal judge move into this sort of land use area.
By the way, the judge, we're talking about Judge David O. Carter.
Yes.
Federal judge.
Federal judge.
In Santa Ana.
In Santa Ana, former Vietnam veteran. I mean, the guy has done his homework. I mean, he's gone out in the field. He's really, in a sense, tried to offer some sort of a solution. Because remember, this all happened because the County Board of Supervisors rushed the plan to shush a bunch of people out by the riverbed because they didn't want them there. And they insisted. This is led by Todd Spitzer, our DA candidate. They insisted that they had the proper facilities that they could shoo these people and they would not have any kind of legal liability. And they ended up in court, and right away this judge goes, no, you don't have the right to just shoo people left and right and start arresting them if you've not done your homework on the front end.
I'm going to be fascinated to see how this all comes out, because I think Judge Carter is being firm, and he's trying to move everybody in a direction to a solution. But what if there's no solution? I think it's very possible the scenario is going to be, end of the day, all the cities, the counties going to say, well, sorry, Judge, we just can't do it. What's he going to do then?
Well,
are you going to have, then suddenly you're going to have homeless people sitting on the beach or sleeping on the beach in the parks, and who's going to take the heat for that? Is it going to be like school busing where you've got protesters and all that? Well, I think it could get very ugly.
Very ugly. This judge has the ability to basically nullify any anti-public campaign.
Because I think he's the kind of guy that I don't think he wants that.
No, he doesn't want that. In that sense, you're right. If he wanted to just be a strict federal judge, he could have solved this in 5 minutes and said, all right, there's no facilities around here, so you can't shush these people away. So guess what? Your anti-camping ordinances are illegal. The Supreme Court has found that it's unconstitutional to do that.
That's why it's going to bear watching. It's going to be fascinating because I don't see a solution right now. And so I don't know what his reaction is going to be.
And here's the solution. Look, remember in liberal LA, which is run by Democrats, San Francisco, Seattle, they all have similar issues with homelessness. So, I mean, it's
bigger issues than
even bigger issues. You're right. It's an endemic issue that does not have easy solutions at all.
Okay, well, Norberto, we could have done a whole separate show on this, man. So anyway, but it'll be a good YouTube video, if nothing else. So thanks, man.
Thank you, brother.